They told you the Omega was the weakest link. They told you that when a wolf is rejected by their mate, it's because they were broken, flawed, or useless. You've heard the fairy tales where the prince saves the girl and makes her a queen. But this isn't a fairy tale. This is a police report from the edge of the territories. This is the story of Sienna, a woman who didn't just survive rejection. She weaponized it. While the alphas were busy fighting for territory, she was in the woods collecting the things they threw away. And when the Alpha King finally tracked her down, expecting a monster, he found a secret that would bring the entire kingdom to its knees. Listen closely. The truth bites. The cabin smelled of wet wool, pine needles, and the sour, metallic tang of starvation. It was a smell Sienna had stopped noticing 3 years ago. Somewhere between the second harsh winter and the arrival of the fourth pup. Outside, the wind howled through the Douglas firs of Blackwood Ridge, a sound like a dying animal. It was 20 degrees below freezing. A blizzard was burying the world in white, which was good. The snow hid footprints. It hid scents. It kept the pack patrols away. Sienna knelt on the splintered floorboards, her knees raw. She was dipping a rag into a bucket of melted snow, wiping the feverish forehead of a 6-year-old boy named Toby. Toby was small for his age, his ribs showing through his pale skin like the rungs of a broken ladder. He whimpered in his sleep, his tiny fists clutching Sienna's oversized, threadbare sweater. Sienna whispered, brushing a lock of matted hair from his eyes. "I'm here to BS. I'm not going anywhere." "Mama," he croaked. Sienna's heart cracked a little, just like it did every time one of them called her that. She wasn't their mother. Biologically, she was nobody, just a 24-year-old Omega with no pack, no mate, and a bank account that had been frozen the day she was exiled. "Sleep, baby," she soothed. A scratching sound came from the heavy oak door. Sienna froze. Her spine went rigid. The wolf inside her, usually a quiet, dormant thing, pricked its ears. Scratching meant one of two things: a lost pup, or a scout testing the perimeter. She stood up, grabbing the iron fire poker she kept by the hearth. She moved silently, her socks sliding over the wood. She peered through the crack in the boarded-up window. Nothing but swirling white. Then a low whine. Sienna didn't hesitate. She threw the bolt and cracked the door open. A gust of ice blasted into the room, threatening to extinguish the single kerosene lamp. Collapsed on the doorstep was a girl no older than 16. She was naked, shivering so violently her teeth shellac like dice. She was half-shifted, patches of gray formatting her human skin, a sign of severe trauma. "Help!" the girl gasped, her eyes rolling back. They're going to kill it." Sienna dropped the poker and dragged the girl inside, kicking the door shut against the storm. This was the 5th one this month, 5 defective wolves cast out by the neighboring packs. "Who?" Sienna demanded, wrapping the girl in the blanket off her own bed. "Who's going to kill what?" The girl clutched her stomach. "My baby." "The Alpha." "Alpha," Elias said. "It's a runt. Said it breaks the bloodline." "Elias?" The name hit Sienna like a physical blow. Elias was the Alpha of the Silver Creek pack. He was powerful, charismatic, and cruel. He was also the mate who had rejected Sienna 4 years ago. Sienna looked at the girl Grisella. She would later learn, and saw the terrified look of a mother who had run through a blizzard to save her unborn child. It was the same look Sienna had seen in the mirror the day she left Silver Creek. "You're safe," Sienna said, her voice hard as granite. "You're in the dead zone now. Elias's laws don't reach this cabin." She didn't know how wrong she was. While Sienna tended to the girl heating up the last can of tomato soup on the wood stove, she didn't hear the hum of engines cutting through the storm 3 miles away. She didn't see the thermal drones hovering above the tree line, their red eyes fixated on the heat signature of the cabin. She was too busy trying to keep 7 rejected children and 1 pregnant runaway alive on a mountain that wanted them dead. The lost pups, the locals called them in hushed tones at the dive bars in the nearest human town. They were the runts, the mutes, the ones born without a shift, or the ones who shifted too early. The waste of the werewolf hierarchy. The Council of Elders decreed that such defects were to be mercifully euthanized to keep the species strong. Sienna was the only thing standing between them and that mercy. But tonight the game was changing. Because the engines approaching weren't just pack patrols. They were heavy armored SUVs with government plates. And leading them wasn't Elias. It was Dorian Steele, the Alpha King. Dorian Steele hated the cold. It reminded him of the cell he'd been born in before his father reclaimed the throne. Now, at Thirtito, Dorian was the most feared predator on the continent. He was 6'4" of corded muscle and lethal instinct, wearing a tactical coat that cost more than most people's houses. He sat in the passenger seat of the lead SUV, watching the thermal display on the dashboard. Target is stationary. Alpha, his beta, a scarred warrior named Kincaid, reported. Single structure. High heat output. Multiple signatures inside. Are we sure she has him? Dorian asked, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the chassis. The tracker doesn't lie, Kincaid said, tapping the screen. Your nephew's scent trail ended 2 miles from here. Then the storm hit. If the boy is alive, he's in that cabin. And the rogue is holding him. Dorian clenched his jaw. His brother, the Alpha of the Northern Territories, had died in a car crash 2 weeks ago. His son, a 7-year-old named Leo, had vanished the same night. The official report said the boy wandered off in grief, but the intel Dorian received suggested something darker. A kidnapping. A ransom plot orchestrated by a rogue Omega living in the dead zone. A woman named Sienna. We take her alive, Dorian ordered. I want to know who paid her to take a royal heir. And if she fights? She's an Omega, Kincaid. She won't fight. She'll submit. The convoy stopped at the foot of the ridge. The snow was too deep for the tires. Dorian stepped out, the wind tearing at his dark hair. He didn't need a jacket. His alpha blood ran hot. He signaled for the tactical team to fan out. They moved like shadows up the slope. Inside the cabin, Sienna felt the shift in the air before she heard anything. It wasn't a sound. It was a pressure, a heaviness in her chest. The wolf inside her whimpered and curled into a ball. Alpha, a powerful one. Everyone into the cellar, Sienna whispered. The kids knew the drill. Toby, the 6-year-old, grabbed the hand of a blind girl named Maya. They moved a heavy rug, revealing a trapdoor. Go, Rowiana hissed. Don't make a sound, no matter what you hear. But Sienna, Grisella started, clutching her pregnant belly. Down, Sienna shoved her gently but firmly. She dropped the trapdoor and kicked the rug back over it. She looked around the room. It was filled with evidence. Small shoes. Drawings on the wall. Extra bowls. She couldn't hide that. She could only hide the bodies. She grabbed the fire poker again. It felt pathetic in her hand. The door didn't just open. It exploded inward, splintered off its hinges by a single powerful kick. Sienna flew backward, crashing into the kitchen table. Wood shattered. The kerosene lamp wobbled but stayed lit, casting long, dancing shadows. Figures swarmed the room. Black tactical gear. Assault rifles. The red dots of laser sights danced across her chest. On your knees, hands where I can see them. Sienna scrambled up, backing against the stove, holding the poker like a sword. Get out of my house. Then the sea of black uniforms parted. A man walked in. He had to duck his head to clear the doorframe. He brought the scent of ozone and storm with him, overpowering the smell of the soldiers. His eyes were the color of steel, and they locked onto hers with a weight that made her knees buckle. Dorian Steele. Sienna recognized him from the news feeds she used to watch in her old life. The king who executed traitors with his bare hands. Dorian looked at the woman trembling against the stove. She was thin, her cheekbones sharp enough to cut. She wore layers of mismatched men's clothing and boots that were held together with duct tape. She looked nothing like the mastermind kidnapper he had imagined. She looked like a cornered rat. Where is the boy? Dorian asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it silenced the wind outside. I don't know who you are, Sienna lied, her voice shaking but defiant. I live alone. Dorian stepped closer. He sniffed the air. Underneath the smell of fear and wood smoke, he caught it. The scent of rain and vanilla. Leo and something else. Something sweet, like wildflowers. It was her scent. It hit him in the gut, confusing his wolf for a split second. He shoved the feeling down. Do not lie to me, Omega, Dorian growled. I can smell him. I can smell the others too. You're running a trafficking ring out of a shack. Or trafficking? Sienna let out a hysterical laugh. Is that what they told you? Beta Kincaid, Dorian commanded without looking away from her. Search the perimeter. Tear this place apart. They know. Oh. Sienna lunged. It was a foolish move. She swung the iron poker at the King of Wolves. Dorian didn't even flinch. He caught the iron bar in one hand, stopping it inches from his face. The metal groaned under his grip. He looked at her, genuinely surprised by her audacity. An Omega attacking an Alpha? It was unheard of. He ripped the weapon from her grasp and tossed it aside like a toothpick. With his other hand, he grabbed her by the throat not to crush, but to pin her against the wall. "Listen to me," he snarled, his face inches from hers. "Give me the boy, and you live to see a trial. Keep fighting, and I will bury you under this cabin." Sienna couldn't breathe, but she didn't look away. She clawed at his wrist, her nails digging in. "He isn't yours. He is my blood," Dorian roared, his control slipping. "He is the heir to the North. He is a child," Sienna gasped out. "And I won't let you kill him like the others." Dorian frowned. "Kill him?" Before he could process her words, a sound came from beneath the floorboards. A muffled cry. Dorian's eyes snapped to the rug. He dropped Sienna. She crumbled to the floor, coughing. "Secure her," Dorian barked to the guards. He strode to the rug and threw it aside. He ripped the trapdoor open. The light from the lamp spilled into the hole. Dorian expected to seek ages. He expected to see chains. He expected to see a dungeon where a witch kept stolen children. Instead, he saw 7 pairs of terrified eyes looking up at him. They were huddled together on a pile of old mattresses wrapped in quilts. And in the center, shielding the others with his small body, was a boy with messy blonde hair. "Uncle Dorian?" The boy whispered. Dorian's heart hammered. "Leo." He reached down to pull his nephew out, but Leo scrambled back, terror in his eyes. "No," Leo screamed, clutching the arm of the blind girl next to him. Don't take me back to the bad doctors." Dorian froze. "Bad doctors?" He looked back at Sienna. 2 guards had her pinned to the ground, her face pressed against the rough wood. She wasn't struggling anymore. She was crying not for herself, but for them. "Please," she sobbed into the floorboards. "Take me. Do whatever you want to me. Just don't let them hurt the kids. They're not defects. They're just kids." Dorian looked from the terror in his nephew's eyes to the desperate woman on the floor. The narrative in his head began to fracture. This wasn't a kidnapping. Leo wasn't a prisoner. He was hiding. And he was hiding from his own family. "Stand down," Dorian said, his voice quiet. "Sir?" Kincaid asked, keeping his knee on Sienna's back. "ISAIDSTA and DDOWN." Dorian's roar shook the cabin walls. "GETOFFHER NOW." The guards scrambled back. Sienna curled into a ball, wheezing. Dorian knelt down not by the trapdoor, but by Sienna. He reached out a hand, she flinched as if he were about to strike her. That reaction, that instinctive fear of an alpha's touch, ignited a cold fury in Dorian's chest. Not at her, but at whoever had taught her to fear like that. "Who are you?" Dorian asked, his voice softer this time. She looked up, her lip bleeding, her eyes fierce and broken. "I'm nobody," she rasped. "I'm the trash you people threw away." Dorian stared at her. For the first time in a decade, the Alpha King didn't know what to do. He had come here to slay a monster. Instead, he found a martyr. And the secret she was protecting was about to change everything he thought he knew about his kingdom. "Pack everything," Dorian ordered his men, standing up. "We're not going to the prison." "Where are we going, sir?" Dorian looked at Sienna, who was crawling toward the trapdoor to reassure the weeping children. "We're going to the palace," Dorian said. "And she rides with me." The ride back to the capital took 4 hours. For most of it, the interior of the armored SUV was silent, save for the hum of the heater and the soft, rhythmic breathing of the sleeping children. Sienna didn't sleep. She sat in the back row, squeezed between Toby and the pregnant girl, Grisella. Her eyes were fixed on the rearview mirror, where she occasionally caught Dorian Steele watching her. The Alpha King had shed his tactical coat. Underneath, he wore a black dress shirt that strained against his shoulders. He was on his phone, typing furiously, likely managing the fallout of a military operation on domestic soil. But every few minutes, his steel-gray eyes would flicker up to the mirror, locking onto hers. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked calculating, like he was trying to solve a puzzle that was missing half its pieces. "You're bleeding," he said suddenly. His voice was low, barely audible over the road noise. Sienna touched her lip. It was swollen where she'd hit the floorboards. "I've had worse." "I don't doubt that," Dorian replied, his tone unreadable. "There's a medical kit under the seat. Use it. I'm fine." That wasn't a suggestion, Sienna. The command in his voice was subtle, a vibration in the air that made the wolf inside her want to bare its neck. Sienna gritted her teeth and fought the instinct. She wasn't his pack. She wasn't his subject. She was a rogue. She reached under the seat, found the kit, and dabbed an antiseptic wipe on her lip, its tongue grounding her. "Why did you take him?" Dorian asked finally, turning in his seat to look at her. "Leo, the report said he wandered off. But a 7-year-old doesn't wander 40 miles into the dead zone in a blizzard." Sienna glanced at Leo, who was asleep with his head on Kincaid's heavy shoulder. The beta warrior looked uncomfortable but hadn't moved a muscle, clearly afraid of waking the boy. "He didn't wander," Sienna whispered. "He ran. He used the emergency burner phone I gave his mother years ago. He called me." Dorian's eyes narrowed. "You knew my brother's mate?" "I knew everyone's mate," Sienna said bitterly. "Before I was the rejected Omega, I was a nurse at the Central Pack Hospital. I was the one who held their hands when the doctors told them their babies weren't adequate." Dorian turned back to the front, silence filling the car again. But the air had changed. The tension wasn't gone, but it had shifted from hostility to curiosity. When they arrived at the palace, it was dawn. The structure was a monolith of glass and steel built into the side of a mountain overlooking the glittering city of Obsidian Heights. To the children who had lived in a drafty cabin for months, it looked like a spaceship. "Stay close," Sienna instructed them as the doors opened. They were ushered not to the dungeons, but to the east wing, the guest quarters. It was luxurious with heated marble floors and silk drapes, but Sienna noticed the details. The windows were reinforced glass. The doors locked from the outside. It was a gilded cage. "Dr. Bennett is on his way," Dorian announced, standing in the doorway of the massive suite. "He will examine the children. If they are healthy, they will be fed and clothed. If they are injured—" He paused, his eyes darkening. "We will handle it." "I want to stay with them," Sienna said, stepping between him and the kids. "You need to be processed," Kincaid interjected, stepping up beside his king. "We need your prince, your DNA, your statement." "You're technically a fugitive, Ms. Sienna." "I stay with them," Sienna repeated. Her voice trembled, but she didn't back down. "Dr. Bennett works for the council. The council is the reason these kids were in the woods. I don't trust him." Dorian looked at her. Really looked at her. She was filthy, wearing clothes that smelled of smoke and old soup, standing up to the two most powerful wolves in the hemisphere to protect children that weren't hers. "Fine," Dorian said. "She stays. But Kincaid stays too to watch her." Dr. Bennett arrived 20 minutes later. He was a balding man with nervous hands and the smell of antiseptic and fear. He clearly knew who the Alpha King was, and he clearly didn't want to be there. He started with Leo. "Drop your trousers, son," Bennett said, snapping on latex gloves. "Need to check for frostbite." Leo flinched, scrambling back into Sienna's arms. No needles, no green juice." The room went deathly silent. Dorian, who had been leaning against the wall, pushed himself upright. "Green juice?" Sienna hugged Leo tight, stroking his hair. She looked up at Dorian, her eyes burning with a mixture of rage and vindication. "Tell him, Leo. Tell your uncle what the doctors gave you to make you shift." Leo sniffled, burying his face in Sienna's neck. They said I was broken because my wolf wouldn't come out. Daddy said the doctors had a special vitamin. But it burned. It felt like fire inside." Dorian walked over to the doctor. The king moved with the predatory grace of a tiger. "Dr. Bennett, what is the boy talking about?" I have no idea, Your Majesty," Bennett stammered, sweating. "Children have active imaginations. Standard vitamin B12 shots can sting." "Leo, show me the marks," Sienna cut in. She pulled up Leo's sleeve. There, on the inside of the boy's elbow, the skin was tracked with needle scars. Some were old and faded, others were angry and red. It looked like the arm of a junkie, not a prince. "That's not B12, Sienna spat. "That's compound versus even. It's a synthetic adrenal stimulant. It's illegal. It forces a shift in late bloomers. It tears their muscles apart and fries their nervous systems. Half the kids who take it die of heart failure before they turn 10. The other half go mad." Dorian stared at the scars. His face went completely blank. It was a terrifying look. It was the look of a man who realized the monster wasn't in the woods. It was in his own house. "My brother," Dorian said, his voice a hollow rasp. "My brother allowed this." "Your brother ordered it," Sienna said softly, "because having a son who couldn't shift was an embarrassment to the bloodline." Dorian turned to drive. "Bennett." The doctor dropped his clipboard. "Get out," Dorian whispered. "Your Majesty, I..." "Get." Dorian roared. The sound shattered a vase on the mantel. "Before I rip your throat out right here in front of these children." Bennett fled. Dorian stood heaving, his hands clenched into fists. He looked at Leo, then at the other children. Toby, Maya, the pregnant Grisella. He looked at their deformities, their scars, their fear. He realized then that Sienna hadn't stolen them. She had salvaged them. He looked at Sienna for the first time. He saw past the dirt in the oversized clothes. He saw the fierce intelligence in her eyes, and he felt it again, that pull, that strange, magnetic tug in his chest. "You," Dorian said to her, "my study. Now, I told you I'm not leaving the—" "Kincaid will guard the door," Dorian interrupted. "No one gets in or out. You have my word as king. But you and I, we need to talk about Elias." Sienna froze. The name hung in the air like a curse. "What does Elias have to do with this?" "Everything," Dorian said darkly. "Because 10 minutes ago, while you were arguing with the doctor, Alpha Elias of Silver Creek called. He knows you're here. And he's coming to claim his property." The king's study was a fortress of mahogany and leather, smelling of old paper and expensive scotch. It was a masculine room, intimidating and cold. Sienna stood in the center of the Persian rug, refusing to sit. She felt exposed here, away from the chaos of the cabin and the children. Here she was just a woman standing in front of the most powerful man in the world. Dorian poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He held one out to her. "I don't drink," Sienna said. "Take it," Dorian commanded softly. "You're going to need it." He sat on the edge of his massive desk, crossing his ankles. He looked tired. The revelation about his nephew had shaken him deeply. "Elias says you stole from the packed treasury before you left," Dorian started. "He says you're a thief and a manipulator who seduced the vulnerable to build a cult in the woods." "Elias is a liar," Sienna said flatly. "I know." Dorian took a sip of his drink. "I saw the look on Leo's face. He loves you. You don't buy that kind of loyalty with stolen money." He set the glass down and leaned forward. "Why did he reject you, Sienna? I looked up your file. You were the head nurse. You have a clean record. You're healthy." His eyes raked over her, lingering for a fraction of a second too long on the curve of her waist beneath the sweater. Sienna looked away, staring at the bookshelf. "He didn't reject me because I was weak. He rejected me because I wouldn't break the law for him." Dorian waited. Elias wanted to rise in the council rankings. Sienna continued, her voice gaining strength. He wanted Silver Creek to be the strongest military pack. He started a breeding program. He wanted me to administer the compound verses even to the pups in the nursery. He wanted to force early shifts to create super soldiers. She turned to face Dorian. "I refused. I threatened to report him to the High Council. So he destroyed me. He fabricated a medical report saying I was barren. In our world, an Omega who can't produce heirs is useless to an Alpha. He publicly rejected me to shame me, froze my assets, and exiled me. He thought if I was a rogue, no one would believe my story about the drugs." Dorian was silent for a long time. The ice in his glass clinked. "And Grisella?" Dorian asked. "The pregnant girl? She's carrying Elias's child," Sienna revealed. "A bastard. He seduced her, then found out the baby has a genetic marker for defects. He ordered her to terminate it. She ran to me instead." Dorian stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the snow-covered city. His hands were clasped behind his back, knuckles white. "If what you say is true," Dorian said, "then Elias isn't just a cruel Alpha. He's a traitor to the crown. Using banned substances on children is treason." "It's true," Sienna said, "but you can't prove it. He burned the records. The only proof is in the blood of those kids in the other room. And if you let the council doctors test them, they'll just make the kids disappear to hide the evidence. The council is involved, Dorian. They have to be. Where do you think Elias got the verses even?" Dorian turned around. The use of his first name surprised him, but he didn't correct her. "You're asking me to go to war with my own council," Dorian said, "based on the word of a rogue." "I'm asking you to be a king," Sienna shot back. "Not a politician." The tension in the room spiked. They were standing feet apart, the air crackling between them. Dorian took a step toward her. He could smell her fear, yes, but also her courage. It was intoxicating. His wolf was pacing inside his chest, agitated, demanding he claim her, protect her, bite her. He reached out his hand, hovering near her face. "Sienna, knock, knock, knock." The heavy oak doors groaned. "Enter," Dorian snarled, annoyed at the interruption. Kincaid stepped in looking grim. "Sir, he's here." "Elias?" "Yes, and he's not alone. He brought a delegation from the High Council. Councillor Thorne is with him. They're at the gates. They have a warrant for Sienna's arrest." Sienna's face went pale. "Thorne, he's the head of the Department of Genetic Purity. If he gets me—" "He won't," Dorian said. "You don't understand." Sienna grabbed Dorian's arm. The contact sent a shockwave through both of them, a static spark that was impossible to ignore. Sienna gasped and pulled back, her eyes wide. She felt it. The bond. The fated connection. Dorian stared at her, his pupils blowing wide, eclipsing the gray irises. He felt it too. It hit him like a freight train. Mate, the word thundered through Dorian's mind. Ancient, binding, inescapable. The rejected Omega wasn't a fugitive. She was his. A cruel twist of fate from the moon goddess herself. "Diana," he whispered. She shook her head, stepping back. "No. If Elias knows—" "Sir," Kincaid interrupted quietly. "The council demands custody. Refusal means war." Dorian's warmth vanished. The Alpha King took control. "Let them in. Throne room." He turned to Sienna, lowering his voice. "You walk beside me. You don't bow. You don't break. They'll kill me. They'll have to kill me first." He offered his arm. Ready to rewrite history. Alpha Elias of Silver Creek looked infuriatingly perfect. He wore a tailored navy suit that accentuated his broad shoulders. His blonde hair was coiffed, his smile practiced and polite. To the cameras broadcasting "Live to the Kingdom," he looked like a concerned leader. Beside him stood Councillor Thorne. Thorne was an older wolf, his hair white, his face lined with the kind of wrinkles that come from smiling while stabbing someone in the back. He held a leather briefcase like a weapon. "This is highly irregular, Your Majesty," Thorne began, his voice oily. "We are here to collect a fugitive and the unfortunate children she has abducted. There is no need for a spectacle." "There is every need," Dorian replied, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling, "because you are accusing a citizen of treason. And in my kingdom, treason is tried in the light." Elias stepped forward, bowing his head slightly, a mockery of respect. "Dorian, excuse me. Your Majesty, we all know you have a soft spot for strays. But Sienna isn't just a stray. She is mentally unwell. The rejection, it broke her." He turned to the cameras, his expression shifting to one of tragic pity. "It is my burden to bear. I had to reject her because she became obsessive, delusional. She started believing the pack doctors were hurting children. She stole my supplies, fled into the dead zone, and began kidnapping pups to fulfill her twisted fantasy of being a mother." Sienna's hands balled into fists at her sides. The lie was so smooth, so perfectly constructed. "Is that why you're here, Elias?" Dorian asked coolly. "To save the children?" "Of course," Elias said. "And to retrieve my nephew, Leo. The boy must be terrified. And the pregnant girl," Dorian pressed. "Grusela." Elias didn't blink. "A tragedy. A runaway teen seduced by a rogue. I simply want to bring her home to her family." "She is family, isn't she, Elias?" Sienna spoke up. Her voice wasn't loud, but in the acoustic perfection of the hall, it carried like a bell. Elias turned to her, his eyes cold. "Sienna, please, don't make this harder on yourself. Grusela is pregnant with your child," Sienna stated. A gasp rippled through the gallery of press and minor nobles. Elias laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "This is exactly what I mean. The delusions. I am a mated alpha. I would never touch a pup like that." "We can prove it," Sienna said. "A DNA test." "Enough," Councillor Thorne slammed his briefcase onto a nearby table. "We are not here to indulge in tabloid gossip. We are here for the law. Under Section 4, Paragraph 2 of the Genetic Purity Act, any wolf deemed biologically compromised or feral is to be remanded to the custody of the Department of Health for containment." Thorne pointed a bony finger at Sienna. "That woman is an unregistered rogue harboring unregistered mutants. Hand them over, King Dorian, or be in violation of the Council's charter." It was a trap. Dorian knew it. If he refused, the Council could vote to strip him of his command for endangering the species. If he agreed, the kids would be dead by sunset. "Those mutants," Dorian said, the growl creeping into his voice, "are children. And one of them is my nephew." "A nephew who failed to shift," Thorne sneered. A eugenetic dead end. He is a liability to the royal line. The law is clear. The law is wrong, Sienna said. She stepped forward, moving away from Dorian's protection. Sienna, Dorian warned, low in his throat. She ignored him. She walked until she was 10 feet from Elias. She could smell his expensive cologne masking the scent of rot beneath. You call them defects, Sienna said to the cameras. You call them waste. But you're scared of them. Scared? Elias scoffed. Of cripples and runts. You're scared of what the verses even did to them, Sienna said. Thorn went pale. She's raving. Seize her. 2 of the council guards moved forward. The verses even compound, Sienna shouted, her voice rising. Synthetic adrenal stimulants. You inject it into late bloomers to force a shift. But it doesn't just force a shift, does it? It breaks the genetic lock on the ancient traits. The room went deadly silent. Even Dorian looked at her in surprise. This was a detail she hadn't told him yet. Ancient traits, Elias hissed. Fairy tales. Is it? Sienna challenged. Toby, the boy in the cabin. You rejected him because he was small. But Toby can hear a heartbeat from 3 miles away. Maya, the blind girl. She can smell fear hormones better than a lie detector. And Leo. She looked at Dorian. Leo didn't fail to shift. His wolf was too strong. The verses even tried to force an alpha wolf into a 7-year-old's body, and his body fought back to survive. You aren't culling the weak, Elias. You're killing the strong because you can't control them. Elias roared, his composure cracking. She's a traitor, a liar, and she is mateless. He lunged at her verbally, using the ultimate insult in their society. No wolf wanted her. I threw her away, she is garbage. Elias raised his hand, channeling his alpha aura, a wave of psychic pressure meant to force an omega to their knees. He wanted to humiliate her, to make her bow on live television. The pressure hit Sienna. Her knees buckled. She gasped, the air squeezed from her lungs by the sheer weight of his dominance. Elias smirked. "C'est? Wake." He stepped closer, raising his hand to backhand her. Then the air in the room evaporated. A sound tore through the hall. Not a human shout, but a primal, vibrating roar that shook the glass in the window frames. Dorian didn't just step forward. He blurred. One moment he was at the dais, the next he was standing between Sienna and Elias. He caught Elias's wrist in Mydra. The sound of bone crunching echoed through the silent room. Elias screamed. It was a high and dignified sound. Dorian twisted Elias's arm, forcing the other alpha down to one knee. Dorian didn't look like a king anymore. His eyes were completely black. His canines had elongated, slicing into his lower lip. The beast was at the surface. You call her garbage? Dorian's voice was a tectonic plate shifting. You call her weak. Let go, Elias gasped, clawing at Dorian's hand. She is nothing. She is an omega. She, Dorian snarled, leaning down so his face was inches from Elias's, is my mate. The declaration hit the room like a bomb. The reporters gasped. Camera flashes erupted like a strobe light storm. Counselor Thorne dropped his briefcase. Elias froze, the pain in his broken wrist forgotten for a second. What? You heard me, Dorian said loud enough for the microphones to catch every syllable. You rejected her. You broke the bond. And the moon goddess gave her to me. Dorian released Elias's wrist with a shove that sent the Silver Creek Hellfist rolling across the floor. Dorian turned to Sienna. She was still trembling from Elias's pressure, but she was standing. He reached out and cupped her face. The moment his skin touched hers, a visible spark of gold energy arced between them. The mark of the fated. The crowd murmured. There was no faking that. I, Dorian Steele, King of the Northern Territories and High Alpha of the Blood Council, claim Sienna as my mate and queen, Dorian announced. Her words are my words. Her protection is my law. He turned back to the council delegation. And she says you are poisoning children. Thorne was trembling. Your Majesty. This is preposterous. Even if she is your mate, she is clearly influencing you. The Versus Even project doesn't exist. Uncle Dorian. The side doors burst open. Tim Cade had been guarding the hallway, but he hadn't stopped the little blonde missile that was Leo. The boy ran into the room, followed closely by Grisella and the other lost pups. They looked different. They were clean. They were dressed in royal velvet, and they were angry. Leo ran straight to Dorian, but then he stopped and pointed at Elias, who was cradling his broken wrist. "He's the bad man," Leo shouted. He held me down. He made the doctor stick the needle in my arm. Elias scrambled up, his eyes wild. He was cornered. His reputation was dead. His career was over. The only thing left was the instinct of a trapped animal. "They are abominations," Elias screamed, spit flying from his mouth. "I was trying to purify the pack. I was trying to make us stronger. By killing your own son?" Grisella stepped forward. She was heavy with pregnancy, rubbing her belly. "You told me to kill this baby, Elias, because you said it would be a runt like the others." "It's a monster," Elias yelled at her. "Just like you." Elias's control snapped. He couldn't win the argument, so he decided to win the fight. With a wet, tearing sound, Elias shifted. His clothes shredded as fur erupted from his skin. Bones realigned. In seconds, a massive gray wolf with yellow eyes stood in the center of the throne room. It was a suicide move. Attacking in the royal court was a death sentence, but Elias was mad with rage. He didn't lunge for Dorian. He knew he couldn't beat the king. He lunged for Grisella. The pregnant girl screamed. Then Sienna moved before anyone else. She didn't have a weapon. She didn't have a shift. She just had the instinct to protect. She threw herself in front of Grisella. Elias's jaws snapped shut on Sienna's shoulder. Blood sprayed across the marble. S-I-N-N-O. Dorian's roar was so loud it cracked the lens of a nearby camera. The king didn't bother to shift fully. He simply let the power explode out of him. He tackled the gray wolf, his human hands transforming into claws Mydra. They crashed into the daze. Dorian was bigger, faster, and infinitely more powerful, but he was also blinded by the sight of his mate's blood. He hammered his fists into the gray wolf's ribs, hearing them snap like twigs. Elias yelped, trying to scramble away, but Dorian grabbed the scruff of his neck and threw him across the room. Elias slid across the polished floor, crashing into the feet of Counselor Thorne. Dorian stood panting, blood dripping from his hands. He turned to Sienna. She was on the ground, Kincaid pressing a jacket to her shoulder. Her face was white, her eyes fluttering shut. "Sienna," Dorian ropped to his knees beside her. The wound was deep teeth marks in the muscle, but it missed the artery. "I'm okay," she gasped, wincing. Did Grisella. "She's safe," Dorian choked out, pressing his forehead to hers. "You crazy, stubborn woman. You jumped in front of a wolf." "Habit," she whispered, a faint smile touching her lips. Dorian looked up. The room was frozen. The gray wolf, Elias, was whimpering on the floor, unable to stand. Dorian stood up slowly. He wiped Sienna's blood from his hands onto his pants. He walked over to where Thorne was cowering next to the broken wolf. "Arrest him," Dorian said to the royal guards, pointing at Elias. "And him," Dorian pointed at Thorne. "Me?" Thorne squeaked. "Your Majesty, I had no idea." "You're the head of genetic purity," Dorian said coldly. "Either you knew about the verses even, in which case you are a monster, or you didn't, in which case you are incompetent. Either way, you're done." The guards seized them. Dorian turned back to the cameras, which were still rolling, broadcasting the blood and the truth to millions. "The Genetic Purity Act is suspended, effective immediately," Dorian declared. "All rejected wolves are to be granted safe passage to the capital for medical evaluation by my doctors. Any alpha found culling pups will be treated as a traitor." He looked down at Sienna, who was being lifted onto a stretcher by the medics. "And the dead zone is closed. No one is forgotten anymore." As they wheeled Sienna out, she looked back at the children. Leo was holding Grisella's hand. Toby was watching her with wide, hero-worshipping eyes. They were safe. But as Dorian walked beside her stretcher, holding her an injured hand, Sienna knew this wasn't the end. Elias was just a symptom. The disease was the council itself, and they wouldn't take this defeat lying down. She squeezed Dorian's hand. "We started a war, didn't we?" Dorian kissed her knuckles, his eyes burning with a promise of violence and devotion. "Yes," he said, "and we're going to win it." 3 months had passed since the blood was scrubbed from the marble floors of the throne room. The winter snows that had once buried the cabin in the dead zone had melted, replaced by the vibrant green of an early spring. The obsidian palace, once a cold fortress of steel and silence, was now filled with a sound that hadn't been heard in its halls for generations. The laughter of children, Sienna stood on the balcony of the East Wing looking down at the royal gardens. Her shoulder still ached when it rained, a permanent reminder of Elias's jaws. But the physical scar was fading. The internal scars, however, were healing in a different way. Below her in the grass, a game of tag was underway. "You can't catch me," Leo shouted, sprinting across the lawn with supernatural speed. "I can hear you breathing, Leo," Toby yelled back. The small boy, once rejected for being too frail, was sitting on a bench with his eyes closed. "You're going left. Now." At Toby's command, a massive figure stepped out from behind a hedge, catching Leo in a gentle bear hug. It was Dorian. The Alpha King was laughing. He tossed his nephew into the air, the boy squealing with delight. Dorian looked younger now. The perpetual frown that had etched lines into his forehead was gone, smoothed out by peace. Sienna smiled, leaning against the stone railing. She wore a simple white sundress, her hair loose. She didn't look like a refugee anymore. She didn't look like a victim. "He's good with them," a voice said behind her. Sienna turned to see Kincaid, the royal beta. He was holding a stack of files. "He is," Sienna agreed. "He's making up for lost time." "These are the latest reports from the ministry," Kincaid said, handing her the files. "Since the Genetic Purity Act was abolished, 12 more packs have come forward. They're dismantling their culling stations. We've had over 200 defective pups brought to the capital for evaluation." Sienna took the files, running her hand over the seal. "And the results?" "The same as ours," Kincaid said, shaking his head in disbelief. 90% of them aren't defective. They're gifted. We have pups with night vision, pups with empathy senses, pups with strength double that of an average alpha. We were throwing away our strongest warriors. The truth had reshaped society overnight. The mutations Elias and the Council had feared were actually resurfacing traits from the ancient bloodlines, powers that had been dormant for centuries. Sienna hadn't just saved a few kids. She had saved the future of the species. "And Elias?" Sienna asked. Kincaid's face hardened. "The tribunal sentenced him and former counselor Thorne this morning. Life imprisonment in the void cells. No parole. They will never see the moon again. It was justice. Cold, hard, and final. S-I-N-N-A. The scream came from inside the palace, echoing down the corridor. It was a sound of pure agony. Sienna dropped the files. Grisella. She didn't run. She sprinted. She kicked off her sandals and tore through the halls, her Omega instincts flaring. Kincaid was right on her heels. They burst into the medical wing. Grisella was in the birthing bed, sweat plastering her hair to her forehead. Her face was contorted in pain. 2 nurses were hovering, looking panicked. "What's happening?" Sienna demanded, rushing to Grisella's side and gripping her hand. "The baby is stuck," one of the nurses said, her voice trembling. "The heart rate is dropping. We might have to operate, but Grisella is too weak for the anesthesia." "No," Grisella gasped, crushing Sienna's fingers. Don't cut him out." Elias said he was a monster. He said he would kill me coming out." "Elias was a liar," Sienna said fiercely, wiping Grisella's face. "Look at me, Grisella. You are strong. You survived the woods. You survived the blizzard. You are going to do this." "I can't," Grisella sobbed. "I'm just a defect. I can't shift." The door banged open. Dorian strode in. He had sensed the distress through the bond with Sienna. "What do you need?" Dorian asked, his presence filling the room with a calming alpha authority. "She needs strength," Sienna said. She looked at Dorian. "She needs the pack." Dorian nodded. He understood. In the old ways, before the council sterilized everything with science, the alpha would lend his strength to the pack members during times of crisis. Dorian walked to the other side of the bed. He placed his large hand on Grisella's shoulder. "Breathe, Grisella," Dorian commanded. It wasn't an order of dominance. It was a transfer of energy. "Take my strength. It's yours." Grisella gasped as the alpha power flowed into her. Her color returned. Her eyes widened, flashing gold for a brief second. "Push," Sienna whispered. Grisella screamed, a primal sound of effort and release. And then, silence, followed by a thin, wavering wail. Sienna slumped against the bed frame, tears springing to her eyes. The nurse moved quickly, wrapping the infant in a warm towel. "Is he?" Grisella whispered, too afraid to look. "Is he okay? Does he have claws? Or scales?" The nurse turned, a look of wonder on her face. She handed the bundle to Grisella. "He's perfect." Grisella looked down. It was a boy. He had 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a tuft of black hair. But when he opened his eyes, the room went still. One eye was the deep chocolate brown of his mother. The other eye was a swirling, luminous violet. Violet, Dorian breathed, leaning in. "I haven't seen that eye color recorded in the archive since the first age. It's the mark of a truth seer." Sienna touched the baby's cheek. Elias wanted to kill him because he would have known. "Known what?" Grisella asked, rocking her son. "A truth seer can see through any lie," Dorian explained, looking at the baby with reverence. If this boy had been born in Silver Creek, Elias could never have hidden his crimes. One look from his own son would have exposed him. Grisella began to cry, but they were happy tears. She kissed the baby's forehead. "I'm going to name him Hope." "No," Sienna said softly. "Name him Justice." That evening, the sun set over the capital, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Sienna stood on the highest balcony of the palace, the wind playing with the hem of her dress. She felt a warmth wrap around her waist. Dorian's arms. He pulled her back against his chest, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He inhaled her scent wildflowers and rain. "The council wants to hold a coronation," Dorian murmured against her skin. "For you." "For us. A formal one," he corrected. "They want to crown the rejected Omega as queen." Sienna laughed softly. "I don't need a crown, Dorian. I have a home. I have the kids. That's enough. It's not about the crown." Dorian turned her around so he could look into her eyes. "It's about the symbol. The world needs to see that power doesn't come from a bloodline or a title. It comes from the heart. You taught me that." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It wasn't a massive diamond. It was a band of woven silver and iron, strong, unbreakable, and simple. "I don't want a queen who sits on a throne," Dorian said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want a partner who runs with me in the woods. I want the woman who looked the Alpha King in the eye and told him to go to hell." Sienna looked at the ring, then at him. She saw the man beneath the monster. She saw the partner she had waited her whole life for, the one who didn't want to fix her, but who wanted to fight beside her. "I didn't tell you to go to hell," Sienna smirked, tears spilling over her lashes. "I told you to get out of my house." "Same thing." Dorian grinned. "So, will you help me rule this mess of a kingdom?" Sienna took the ring and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Only if we change one more law," she said. "Name it." "Every Sunday," Sienna said, looking down at the gardens where the lost pups were finally sleeping safe and sound. "Every Sunday, the king has to cook dinner. No chefs. Just you." Dorian groaned, pulling her in for a kiss. "You drive a hard bargain, mate. Take it or leave it, Alpha." He took it. He kissed her deep and slow, sealing the pact under the light of the rising moon. Far below in the city, the lights were coming on. In the nurseries, the defective children were sleeping without fear of the morning. In the void cells, the villains sat in silence. And in the palace, the Alpha King and his rejected queen stood together, ready to face a new dawn. The story of the lost pup was over. The story of the pack had just begun. And that is the story of Sienna and Dorian Steele. It started with a rejection that was meant to destroy her, but instead, it forged her into the only person strong enough to save the kingdom. It reminds us that sometimes the things the world calls flaws are actually our greatest strength waiting to be discovered. Elias tried to bury the truth, but he forgot the most important: the wild you can't hide from the dawn. What did you think of the twist about the ancient traits? And have you ever felt like your differences made you an outcast, only to realize later they were your superpowers? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story moved you, please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Until the next full moon, sweet dreams.